Welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kendra Jason. I'm a sociologist and workplace equity consultant, and I will bring guests onto the show who reflect the diversity of the American workforce. On this podcast, I challenge you to think about work. Why? Because in America, we spend more time at our jobs than anywhere else. But how often do we really talk about work? And I mean all types of work: women's work, essential work, retirement, being your own boss, how to handle your boss, and so much more. Please subscribe and share the Jobs and Work with Work for Change podcast. You can learn more about my consultancy that supports this podcast at work4changellc.com. Hello, and welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. This is episode 36, and this is actually a reintroduction to our podcast. And so today I'm going to have with me Kris. Kris is my partner with Work for Change, and we're going to just start out and have some conversations about what we've been doing over the year, what we have to look forward to, and really what's new. All right. So for those of you who do not know us, I'm Kendra Jason, and of course, this is Kris Maycumber.
Hello.
And I founded a workplace equity consultancy last year called Work for Change. It has been doing really, really well. We're going to talk about that. But one of the more fun things that came out of Work for Change is this podcast. And so this podcast is a way for us to connect with you all, connect with the community, connect with workplaces, connect with, employers and employees, but also it's a wonderful platform for Kris and I to explore our sociological minds. And so Kris and I met in graduate school 20 years ago. We're both sociologists by training. We both have PhDs in sociology. And so we like to use, this space to really talk about what's going on in the world today as it relates to work. All right. And so I think I want to give one more part of an introduction before I kind of jump into the conversation. So, it's really, really interesting with a podcast because there's a lot of opinions about podcasts. So, Kris, I was watching Sex and the City, the new version that came on HBO. And one of the funny lines that Carrie said was just like, everybody has a podcast now. She said it in a more funny way. And I said, you know what? I do too. And does that mean like, am I just doing the trendy thing or whatever? And actually, yes and no. Okay, number one, you do the trendy thing. When you're in business, you really need to find a way to connect with your potential customers and clients and give people a way to get to know you. And that's what this platform is for. But in addition to talking to Kris, one of the wonderful, wonderful things that I love to do on this podcast is bring special guests on, and we talk about, just different experiences that they've had over their careers or their work lives. If they're an older worker, if they're in management, if they're in fashion or design or started their own company, we have a platform for that as well. So I look forward to the guests that we'll bring on this year. All right. So now I've done all the talking, but this is
hard to do.
I know. And so, Kris actually really encouraged me to do this podcast. And so I want to turn it over to Kris for a moment and talk to, if you will, talk to them about why you thought that this podcast was a key mode of communication for us as we got Work for Change started.
Yeah, thanks, Kendra, for that sort of lead in. I'm really happy to be back on the Jobs and Work podcast. It's been a while since I've been on, and I've missed our conversations. So back before, when Work for Change was a little seedling, Kendra and I put our heads together. Kendra started and said, reached out and was like, we're in COVID, we're in quarantine. We always want to work together. We want to make work better. We know how to do that. We want to help people make work better. And as we got our, conversations going, I was like, you need to have a podcast. Like, your voice needs to get out there. You've got to, create this narrative about how do you make work better? Why should we
Right.
make work better?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and use your insights as a sociologist, right, to get that sort of framework out there. And Kendra was like, I don't know, a podcast. I don't listen to podcasts really. This is, back when you weren't a podcaster or
Right.
podcast consumer. And but I said, no, I think so. Like, we'll do it. Let's jump in there and, we'll have a topic and we'll bring guests on and the whole, Kendra ran with it. Once you started bringing guests on and the conversations that you got people to have,
Yeah.
listening to that, like learning, not only do we learn about the different professions, like there's jobs out there I didn't know existed that you brought guests on and people make careers out of a life passion, whether it's starting your own business, bringing a
Mm-hmm.
small business owner on, or whether it's someone who you're, featuring some segment of the American workforce. There is such a sort of breadth and depth of
Yeah.
conversation that this podcast has. And there's always these little nuggets of wisdom and inspiration that the guests offer, because reflecting on work is really important. We spend a lot of our lives working and being more meaningful and more intentional and more thoughtful and sometimes more critical about
Right.
how we do work,
Right.
and how we can do work better as employers, as managers, as supervisors,
Mm-hmm.
as coworkers and colleagues, and all of that. I think it's a great time. So one of the questions that I had coming into this conversation is, and we can both sort of share this, but I wanted to float it out there to you, Kendra, because I know you have thoughts about this, is why now? Why? Why are we in this moment where conversations about work matter? And I think they've always mattered, but I feel like we are in this cultural, social moment where people are sort of like almost hungry to be
Mm-hmm.
more intentional. So why now?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. I feel like it's a good question for like a TED talk.
Yeah. Oh, get your post-it note out.
The thing is that, Americans have always had a really interesting relationship with work, right? I mean, just thinking historically, how so many of our ideals as a society are based off the Protestant ethic, right? Where
Yeah.
you work, right? And even Christianity, right? And so, in
Hmm.
Christianity and in America, so many people are Christians. It's like Jesus worked. Literally, Jesus hasn't had an occupation as a carpenter, right?
Hmm.
And so our basic principles as a society have always valued contribution and work and finding a sense of purpose and dignity in work, right? But then the other half of American society, if I really just, make it disproportionate, is that, America is very capitalistic in nature. And by definition, capitalism is based in exploitation. And the reason that is because capitalism is designed to get the most profit out of the least amount of wages, right? And so as we contribute so much of ourselves into a capitalistic society, we actually don't get the returns equally,
Hmm.
right? Depending on your race and gender and social status and background and things of that nature. But in America, again, we all, in general, believe in the American dream ideology, which is if you work hard and by the will of yourself, then you can be successful. And that success, the vehicle for that success is the work that you do. Right. So that's a little bit of like, jumbled up history. But what brings it to the now is, of course, COVID-19. Right. And so COVID-19 happened 2 years ago now, almost exactly 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
um, and what COVID did is it interrupted that pattern of work, right? Or disrupted that pattern of just sort of like mindlessly following the pattern of going to work and contributing to society in that way, right? And it forced a lot of people to, number one, for people in more professional or middle class jobs, they had to go home, work from home, work remotely. And so that really clear, for some people, really clear line between work and home got blurred in ways that exponentially blurred, because it wasn't purely one or the other in other ways. And then there was a highlight on a different type of worker, which is the essential worker, which we were all of a sudden like, oh, we really need, these low income service workers to keep our society going. And they're really valuable because of that. And so all of these things together put people in a position where they really start questioning if they're happy in the work that they're doing, if they're being fulfilled in the work that they're doing, or for more practical reasons, if their employers and their workplaces are treating them fairly for the conditions in which they are working now, which was under COVID-19, and then put that on top of however they were feeling about their jobs before, because not everybody was loving their job in the first place. So you may not be loving your job in the first place, or your job is just okay. And then you get put in this, this global phenomenon where all of your safety nets are now rickety, all your safety bridges are now rickety. And so it just really put people in a place where they're, considering their options, and some being forced out of work, or forced into care work, or forced into situations where they're really trying to figure out how to navigate this new space. And so that's my short TED Talk for that answer.
Well, and we had so many episodes about different variations of how COVID was impacting workers, how it was impacting like working parents. So if anyone is interested, go back to the archives on the YouTube channel to find, we even had one about the Great Resignation, which is our most viewed, I believe, right, podcast episode from, people just interested. Like that was a huge shift in the workplace and in the workforce, is that the pattern, and we're still seeing more data come out now about, what happened last year and what happened in 2020. So the conversation is certainly significant as we move ahead and as we sort of edge out of COVID in terms of the like dramatic impacts that it has had on us. So Kendra, another thing that I was thinking about is Work for Change, has just hit its 1-year anniversary. And, I would like to hear you talk a little bit about we talked about this in the very first episode, what Work for Change does, what services Work for Change provides as a consulting, as a workplace equity consulting agency. What does Work for Change do? So tell our listeners what Work for Change does and how we do it.
Yeah, because we are a business. So, workplace, Work for Change is a workplace equity consultancy. Our tagline is humanizing the workplace. And basically what that means is that we want to go in and assess your workplace environment, your workplace culture. We talk to people and really try to understand what we can help you do to make better workplace experiences for all of your employees and workers, and even for management too, right? And so we provide training. We call them learning series, because we can do one-shot deals, but we like to build a relationship with companies so that we can implement, recommend and help them implement some practices that align with their organizational values. So this is the thing, and I think this is the short answer, is that a lot of companies either want to be more equitable in their practices or need to be more equitable in their practices, but they just really don't know how. They don't know how to incorporate. They don't know how to translate that value system or that vision into practices. And so what we do is we help them bridge that connection, definitely going through policy, definitely thinking about everyday workplace experiences, and definitely thinking about communication. And so the 4 services that we provide, and you can of course check out the website, change-llc.com, and look at our services. But our services are, we have organizational assessment, which is basically what I just explained. And then we have communication, because what we found, or what we know as experts of organizational behavior is that communication is the foundation of your organization. And so communication are not just your emails and not just how you talk and interact in meetings, but it's also your vision statements, your reputation, and how you interface with the community. So all of those things matter in communication. So we really dig in there and help you enhance your communication so that you can reach the goals that you want to have. Another thing that we do, of course, is just like I said before, we offer training and workshops. We call them learning series. And just depending on the client's needs, they can be a 6-month series, an 18-month series, a 2-year series, just based on the client need. And then finally, and I think I'm going to like pitch this over to Kris, we offer a really, really, really unique service of digital archiving and digital storytelling. So that is Kris's area. So I'm gonna let you talk about that better.
Yes. This is when I get to light up a little bit more. Digital storytelling is one of the services that we provide at Work for Change. And what we do is while we're going through our learning series, while we're going through our consulting partnerships, we document that process. And what I say to our partners and our clients is there's a change story here that's unfolding. Where are you at now? What are your goals? Where do you want to go? We're going to help you get there. And we're going to document that process as we go through it. So at the end of that, whether it's 6-month, 12-month, 18-month, that change story has unfolded, and we capture that through like a documentary style digital story. And I call it a digital archive because you can then have that archive as a product for your company or your business as a way to retain the sort of the institutional memory of what you went through. Because what we know is that these problems, these equity challenges will outlast the organizational ebbs and flows, right? The turnover in leadership, the turnover in staff, these problems are durable and they're persistent. So instead of like in 5 years from now running into the same problems and say, oh, we already addressed this equity issue, you can have this archive that you can use to onboard new members. You can use it to train new staff and to not lose the institutional memory of what you went through and how you went through it. And we've had clients say to us, nobody is doing this, and we really like this service, and tell us more about that video. And it is one of those services that we love to provide because it really helps enrich the process that we do as consultants. And and I've had actually one of our clients who we are working with now in a sort of follow-up capacity has said that they've had a lot of turnover as of late, and that they're excited to show their new hires the archive so that they can say, this is what we did last year. This is what we learned about. This was our learning series, to kind of catch them up to it. And I'm like, that's exactly why we do it. So,
and this is where I have to get a bit nerdy, right? Yeah. Because, what makes us really special and unique is that Kris and I are literal in inequality in general, any type of inequality, any ism, ISM, racism, sexism, class, Title IX, Kris has a lot of expertise in. We are trained, 20 years of experience doing these trainings, teaching in classrooms about work and inequality and organizational relationships and power dynamics, right? And so the thing is that anybody can come up to you and say they can offer you a digital archive, but they're not going to have that sociological insight. And the thing too is that Kris and I are both trained as qualitative sociologists. And basically what that means is that we really care about people's stories and people's narratives and really bringing that voice to the center of the story. And so what's really important for us as Kris is capturing these digital archives is that, we capture the essence of who your workers are or who you are as management or what your workplace stands for in the community, and not like in a a cheesy commercial way,
Mhm.
but in a really authentic way, where we want to truly capture the voice and the story and the experiences
Mhm.
of people who work, and we capture a transition, right? Because people hire us because they want to make things better, right? So what that means is that they're not optimal when they first hire us. And so the archive starts and say, well, this is where we are now. And then it ends with it, and this is how far we've come.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's just really, this is one of the things I'm really, really proud of to offer as one of our services, because Kris has this very, very unique skill that sort of rounds out our package. And so before we go, because we like to keep these podcasts about 20 minutes or so. I did want to say how much I appreciate our guest from 2021 who came onto the podcast. It was such a wide range of people. And one thing that I really, love about this podcast, well, first I'll say that I was really insecure about having a podcast. Kris and I actually started the podcast together. We did every episode together. And then Kris had a transition and I was just like, okay, well, I'll do it on my own. And I was really scared because I didn't have Kris, to kind of bounce my ideas off of. We have this like energy going and things of that nature. And I remember talking to one of our guests, Michael Dorsey, right? He's a communication expert. And I told him this in the conversation. And he was like, but Kendra, you're a great communicator, right? You have a good podcast. He says, so basically stop saying that you're not a podcaster and you're not a great communicator, because guess what? You are, and you're doing it. And you know what? As soon as he said it, I believed it, and then it also reminded me of, it's the same advice that I give those who take our Starting Your Own Business workshop, which is another like wonderful branch of Work for Change. We offer a Starting Your Own Business workshop for people who are interested or thinking about starting their own businesses, or who have started their own businesses and need some troubleshooting, to kind of get it going and to make it successful. And, I always tell them, everyone comes in this workshop insecure and they say, I have an idea, but everybody has this idea. Everybody is being an influencer. Everybody has a consultancy. Everyone has a catering business, right? And the same advice that Mike gave me, I gave them. And it's that, but it's not yours, right? The essence of who you are makes it special. And one thing that I work with the participants of that workshop in is really helping them center their business around who they are. So it doesn't matter who else is out there, because no one can do it the way that you do it. So this podcast is mine. I love to have Kris on with me. Kris will be joining me at least once a month when we have our conversations with Kris and Kendra. But at the end of the day, I want to take Mike's advice and say, you know what, this is my platform. This is my podcast. And for my 6 to 8 viewers who watch every week, thank you. But you know what, Kris, I don't know if you noticed, we have 80 subscribers.
Oh, that's 80 more than we had at the beginning. So there you go.
And you know what? It's and the wonderful thing about that, I'm really, some people, like, I know people who have thousands of subscribers, millions of subscribers. Great, and great for them. But each and every subscriber, each and every person is a surprise to me. It's so appreciated, because I'm just like, wow, somebody like my podcast enough to want to keep up with it, get notifications. Maybe they knew someone who was on the podcast and they just want to support it. Whatever their motivation is, it's meaningful to me. And another thing that I tell those people who take that Starting Your Own Business workshop is that don't compare yourself to other people's likes and shares and things of that nature. I can do a whole nother podcast on why that is so. But the really important thing to realize is that, be consistent, get comfortable in your own voice and in your own experience, and the growth and the support will come. And you'll be so surprised at all of the areas in which it will come. And so I just wanted to number one, give Mike a shout out for giving me that advice. But every single guest, every single person drop some type of nugget, and not just one thing, like several things. And I just enjoy those conversations so much. And I look forward to our new cast of guests that we'll have this year as well.
It's good to be back on.
Yep. And so, I'll say what is happening next for Work for Change. So we're in the middle right now of our Starting Your Own Business workshop. It's a 2-part series. It happens in 2 weekends. And let me tell you about growth, right? So my workshop is in EST, Eastern Standard Time, starts at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., right? How about I have people in California taking my workshop?
Of course you do.
So the thing is that when I started this workshop, I was only thinking locally, like, maybe some of my friends will do it. Yep. Most of my connections are on the East Coast. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Most of my connections on the East Coast, so everybody can work with EST time.
Yeah.
I'm in a situation now where I have to think nationally about programming. Yeah. And this is like less than a year later, right? And so now
we had international contracts with companies spanning 5 countries. So I mean,
yes, and that's another thing. Like Work for Change again. When Kris and I started Work for Change, I had no expectations. I was like, hopefully we'll get a contract. Maybe let's shoot for 3 contracts over the year. We can have one in this is how we think, in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. And when we said contract, we meant just maybe like 1 workshop. Like,
I was looking through like this little, let's do this. And all of a sudden it went like, boom.
Do you know at the end of 2021, we had secured 9 contracts. 9 contracts, 3 months long, 6 months long, 18 months long contracts. And that didn't even count the contracts that were in negotiation to start for 2022, which we started out the gate in 2022 with 4 contracts, Kris. So again, I'm not even gonna say, I'm not saying it's a brag, because it's just not. It's just telling, just really, emphasizing that if you have a business plan, if you have an idea, and you build a network of support, and I can help you do that. Honestly, that's what we do in our Start Your Own Business workshop.
Yeah.
And you remain consistent, then the growth will come. It's literally a proven formula.
Yeah.
All right. And so
there's a need out there. There's the need is out there. We are hired because of the need that is out there that we're filling. And there is an abundance of needs out there. So people have to fill them. That's how it works.
It is. And you were saying earlier about like, why now? So one thing about COVID, and we talked about this a lot last year, is that COVID, in all of its tragedy, also offered opportunities. It offered opportunities to be innovative, to think outside the box, to kind of push you in an uncomfortable zone that you would actually move where before you didn't move. And it creates opportunities for new businesses, right? So for example, so many companies, and this is why Work for Change is so successful, so many companies are responding to the racial uprisings of 2020. Right? That they want more DEI training, diversity, equity, and inclusion training.
Which we have a podcast episode about that topic too.
We do.
We didn't skip a beat. We hit every socially relevant topic, issue, challenge out there. We have a podcast episode about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that companies have, so another thing is that so many companies have funds earmarked for exactly what you offer or want to offer, but they don't have anybody to fill the need. It's literally trying to find someone to pay to do a certain type of work. And it doesn't have to be diversity, equity, and inclusion, as in the example that I just gave, but so many people are apprehensive to start their own businesses or to take the leap into the next thing because they're like, there's a fear of rejection, right? And they're just like, who's going to pay me for what I do, right? I could talk to you more about that and start your own business workshop. But one thing that I will tell you is that the money is there to fund your dream, to fund, your business, to fund your idea. All right. And so as far as what's on the horizon, Work for Change, we have a new newsletter that's coming out soon. We're going to continue our Starting Your Own Business workshops. Kris and I we've broken out of the virtual space. Yep. Kris and I are literally flying across the country to do trainings in person now. Of course, we're masked, and of course, we're vaccinated. But we started this business virtually. Right. But now we're able to travel literally across the country to provide the services that we are. So we have those type of connections coming up. And I have another announcement for something else that's coming up, but I haven't made the official announcement yet. So I have that coming up soon. Ooh. So that's something to stay tuned about. But you know what, Kris, I've had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time reconnecting with you on this podcast. I want to shout out Ramia, who created our new introduction to the podcast.
Ramia is incredible, and that new intro is awesome.
So shout out to Ramia, who's the executive assistant for Work for Change. And so stay tuned. We have a new guest coming up in a couple of weeks. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Look, just go to Linktree. We have all of our social medias on that Linktree platform. So please like, subscribe, and share as we work to make the world of work better.